tell you if somebody can come drill on your property.
There are three questions I've got here. The first one is, when drilling through sandstone to inject salt chemical water fracture the sandstone and compromise the stability of the stone? Then once cracked or broken, wouldn't the stone begin to break down, compromising our well water or potentially causing earthquake or other damage? The drilling itself, it depends on the actual formation you're drilling through. If you've got a substantial amount of sandstone, you'd probably be able to drill through it without cracking it per se. But a problem that would be just as bad is trying to get a seal around the casing of the well to prevent oil or other contaminants, especially if they're under pressure, which they often are, and they will be if you're injecting water down there or trying to do enhanced recovery. In a lot of cases, you might be able to get a good seal around the casing when it's installed, but they break down over time. If the casing is not properly sealed, then any contaminants under pressure can come up around the casing. So if you had an aquifer on top of that through a sandstone layer, that could get contaminated in that fashion. Or if you had natural fractures in the sandstone, the oil can travel through those fractures once the pressure is in the right direction. I've seen areas where you might have 1,000 meters of overburden or formation on top of an oil deposit, and you have natural leakage going up through all that to the top, and an oil pool at the top, just from natural pressures. The fact that you would have that kind of leakage means you've got quite a bit of fracturing naturally there, and you've got enough pressure underground to drive it up. It doesn't come up like a gusher, but it comes up in seepage over a long period of time. The second question is, what specific data does a hydrogeologist need to evaluate the potential for freshwater contamination in the environs of an enhanced oil recovery injection well? Geologists are famous for saying, let's drill one more hole and get more data, because that's how we get data, basically. It's hard to get enough to have 100% assurance on a geology situation. But, for example, if you're drilling a borehole through an aquifer down to an underlying oil deposit, you're setting up a possible conduit just by the fact that you drill that. And the stats I've seen for oil wells in the Gulf of Mexico, for example, is that once they're drilled and sealed, that those seals deteriorate over time, so that a large fraction of them, 50, 60% of the seals break down over a 10 to 15 year time frame. So you're setting up a situation that eventually will have contamination going around the borehole casing. But that's what you need to get, is as much data as is available. Any data to a geologist or boreholes and logs on the boreholes. Other things are, if you have water wells, water levels in the wells, they measure the hydrostatic pressure. The same thing for an oil well is what the pressure is down there. Is that oil under pressure? Which it often is. If you tap into it, then it's going to go up, or it could go up through natural fractures. A lot of times, I don't know about any of these cases, but a lot of times when people are exploring for oil, they do seismic work and or geophysical work, and they produce geophysical data which can be evaluated. Oftentimes you can see faults and fractures on geophysical output. So all I could say is the more data you have, the better off you are. And if you've got other wells in the vicinity, you need to get their boreholes and look at where they're drilled and what kind of geology they impacted and what kind of fluids they impacted or they found when they drilled the wells. the closer a water supply aquifer or well is to a injection well, the more chance there's going to be a problem and contamination from that. The same thing if you have more injection fluids being injected at a higher rate, the higher rate is going to give you more of a chance of contamination. But even with small rates, you can have contamination. It's just that the odds are for a worse chance the more your activity is doing. Third question was, how do we know when we have enough data to be sure there won't be seismicity or water pollution? Well, geology is a science, but it's not a perfect science. You have to go on experience and probability to evaluate the data you've got. If you've got a borehole going down through an aquifer, there's a chance that you've opened up a contaminant pathway. If you've got a good seal, that pathway may be sealed, but it may not stay sealed. If you drill a well and you start injecting, if you don't see any problems in the first year, that doesn't mean you're not going to ever have problems. The problem could be developing slowly over a period of time. In Denver, when they started injecting, they didn't see a problem right away. They started having earthquakes, I think, half year to a year later. It's hard to, geologists have not yet figured out how to predict earthquakes. They haven't yet figured out how to predict volcanic eruptions, and we have some dead geologists that prove that. They wouldn't have been where they were if they thought the volcano was going to erupt. There was a USGS volcanologist who was killed on Mount St. Helens in 1980 because he didn't think that volcano was going to erupt when it did.
Two questions that were sort of put together. Is there any opportunity for a public hearing with the KCC? The hearing is public, but the public is not permitted to speak or ask questions or submit anything at that time. So as I said, all of the testimony is pre-filed, and that is the only testimony that can be accepted. So, I mean, the public part is the public opinion time period where you can write a letter. They've really gotten a little more stringent with with the requirements on what you can say in your letter. We sent over 200 postcards to the Kansas Corporation Commission saying no injection wells in the Flint Hills or something like that, and then with people's names and addresses, because at that time was the only thing that they had said that you need is a name and address. So we sent 200 very beautiful vintage postcards to the Kansas Corporation Commission office in Wichita, and I think they really appreciated it because they changed the regulation and said that you've got to say why you think it's a bad idea, why this, why that. So anyway, the public protection part of their mission statement, Kansas Corporation Commission, is a hood ornament. It's there to sound pretty, but the reality is that they are there to protect the corporations. It's right there in the name. Do you think there's any possibility of the KCC denying a permit through a docket hearing? Or is the best path through the legislature? And I'm really glad somebody asked that question because I failed to mention that if you followed our deal, you saw that we did not appeal the decision. When they finally approved this well, we didn't appeal it. Our lawyers, Robert I from here in Lawrence, and we talked to him about it. The thing is that they denied the permit based on their regulations. There's nothing outside, what they did was perfectly within their legal abilities to do. So we do believe that the best way forward is the legislature. Over 30 legislators signed a letter that urged the Kansas Corporation Commission to deny this permit. that letter was ignored completely. It was not presented on the docket. It was not a part of the hearing whatsoever. So there is a push, and it was a bipartisan push. I think that there is momentum. So rather than, bang our head against the wall with the Kansas Corporation Commission, who just kind of lives in their own land of made-up arbitrary regulations that they can change apparently at any time, because now we know that over 30 of these injection wells that have been approved in the last couple of years were not permitted according to their regulations. There are only 15 days given for a comment period. Many things that they did, they broke their own rules, approved the wells, and that's okay. So yes, I do believe that the way forward is through the legislature. I personally wanted to appeal, but was encouraged by others that by other people in our team that this would be a waste of our donors' money. And I finally saw that to be true. I finally believed that to be true, just because there was nothing that we could appeal with that would say, hey, you didn't do this right. They did it right, according to their regulations. So yes, I would say that the best path is through the legislature. So please be contacting your legislators, and thank you to those of you who are here listening and caring. Thank you.
It's okay.
So this question says, did you say you did have mineral rights? No, we do. We do have them. We have them on, okay, so there were two 80-acre sections. I don't know if you can find those. The two 80-acre sections, one side is referred to as the Pearson lease and the other side is referred to as the Finnerty lease. And so on this side, anybody who bought land over here owns their mineral rights. And so we have an eighth collectively, we have an eighth of the oil production that's taken place. So I just want to point out that this land right here belongs to our oil operator. Now, if we can skip to the picture that shows the current state. Yeah, okay, see, there's no oil wells. Isn't that interesting? So then on the Finnerty side, so over here on this side, the wooded, completely wooded land, when we bought our 5 acres, which is right here, we did not own our mineral rights. And most of the people who own homes on that side did not own their mineral rights. But through this 5-year process, we were able to purchase some of them from one of the people who owned them, and they had just inherited them, and because the royalty payments they're so small, I mean, it's really ridiculous. It'll take us forever to recoup the cost of buying those mineral rights from them, but at least if we ever get to have a say, we have a say, because we did go to those links to get them.
My question, I'm Amy's neighbor, Sarah, and we own our mineral rights, and she lives right here. Yeah, next door. You recently experienced a leaking well in your front yard. Will you share with us what occurred and how the KCC responded? So that picture of the orange stuff was in our front yard. I noticed a big patch kind of going bare in our front yard, and eventually this kind of came bubbling up to the surface. So kind of went out and it was salty. So I called the KCC. And they did come out and they made the operator repair it, which took a lot. And they said they dug down in the top of this it was an old well shaft that had been capped by a piece of plywood. And I started standing there and I said, I don't know a lot about geology, but I said to the KCC guy who was inspecting it, I said, isn't this coming up through my water table? Because that's taken from my front yard, my porch. You can see the overhang of my porch. And he said,
And our water table is roughly anywhere from about 30 to 90 feet.
yeah. And
So
he
anything
said,
that comes up through that would theoretically have to.
yeah, and he said, Oh, I would drink the water. That's the solution.
And since we have no alternative but to drink the water because we do not have rural water in our area, we have to have well water.
Water. We're still drinking it.
Yeah. That's why we got like this. That's in the front yard.
There's a question.
There's two questions which I'm not sure any of us can answer. One is, where's the additional wastewater coming to Douglas County coming from? Do we know that, the answer to that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'm an official answerer of that question, but, okay, so on, let's see, the grid that has all the flags on it, one of those would be good. Okay, so every one of these, so this is 10 acres. So there's a well every 2.5 acres in this pattern. It's called a 5-spot pattern. And these injection wells are in the very center of every one of the 4 oil wells throughout the whole thing. So these tank battery sites, so the injection fluids, which are salt water and some other chemicals, are pressured into the earth in the center for the purpose of pushing the oil over to the 4 pump jacks to bring it up out of the earth. And then those, all of it, the fluids and the oil, get sent to the tank battery. The very center, the largest one, is called a gun barrel. I learned this from the oil guy. And so then the oil goes to one side, it divides, and the oil goes to one side, and the other fluids go to the other side. And then the big water tank, the tanker truck that I say comes down our road once, twice, maybe more every day. I say our road, it's our road because it's on our property, but we don't ever use it. They come and they get those injection fluids, and then they have to take those injection fluids to a waste disposal site. And that's the wells that we're talking about for wastewater.
How much more wastewater will be injected than is presently injected both in Baldwin and Eudora? That we don't know, right?
Every day they're pumping it.
It's dependent on how much more they pump, how much they continue to pump.
Okay.
What lessons learned from Oklahoma experience with injection wells? Has water been contaminated? Other problems noted? And I can't fully answer that question other than to say that there have been in the area that I know of, and I don't live there anymore and haven't for 12 years now, but in the area there's lots of unproven suspicions about what really the cost is of wastewater injection, because along with the earthquakes with property damage that is not compensated up until this ruling that happened, and I'm still not really clear on really how strong that recourse is that they've given to property owners for damages. I don't know how that's all going to pan out and if that's actually going to benefit or what the loopholes are and everything. But in addition to the property damage, the waterways in Oklahoma are completely contaminated. The fish kills that happen on a regular basis that I hear about from neighbors and friends down there are just